ooh, that's funny. Next thing you know, you see it on HBO or something. You be sitting at home, that shit mine, you know? But
I met Bernie years and years ago when I used to have a golf tournament down in Bermuda. And Bernie was the highlight of my comedy Give to You. And Bernie, unlike me, I get angry about it.
I always said he walked alone. I don't think he was walking alone at all. I think Bernie was walking with Jesus the whole time.
You sign up for their program, you get a light-skinned, weird-faced wife that never do an interview.
Tell me the first thing I said to you.
I don't know who this is, but I'm gonna marry.
Samuel L. Jackson and Katt Williams just blew the roof off the entire Marjorie Harvey narrative. And nothing about her carefully constructed image is ever going to look the same again. Because what these receipts are revealing isn't some messy tabloid rumor. This is a full indictment of a woman who allegedly operated as a shadow power player while the whole world thought she was just Steve Harvey's stylish wife.
Always carry yourself like a lady. Being a lady never goes out of style.
And the allegations don't stop at optics. According to the information that's been surfacing, Marjorie wasn't just present in Steve's life, she was allegedly directing it. The claim on the table is that she is the one who poisoned the well between Steve and Bernie Mac, one of the most beloved comedians this culture has ever produced. That alone should stop you cold. But it goes even deeper than that. Steve's ex-wife, Mary, has alleged that Marjorie manipulated Steve into turning his own son against his biological mother. Not for loyalty, not for love, allegedly for money.
Winton took my Winton from me. He turned my son against me, had me evicted from our house. He maneuvered everything. He maneuvered He manipulated the courts, everything against me.
To protect her access to the Harvey fortune by eliminating anyone with a competing claim on Steve's attention or assets. That is a calculated move, not a personality conflict. Then there's Marjorie's history. 2 marriages to men who were moving serious weight in the streets. That's documented. That's not gossip. So when Samuel L. Jackson and Katt Williams both signal that this woman is far more dangerous than she appears, you have to take that seriously. Now let's go straight to the Bernie Mac situation. Because if Marjorie's fingerprints are on that story, everything changes. Steve and Bernie had friction going back to the Kings of Comedy era, that much was known. But now there are explosive new accounts claiming Steve didn't just distance himself from Bernie. He allegedly tried to have him blacklisted out of Hollywood entirely. And the reason that detail hit so hard is because Steve stood at Bernie's funeral with tears running down his face, and to this day talks about the man like they were brothers until the very end.
I think Bernie was walking with Jesus the whole time.
What makes this whole thing even more damning is that Bernie didn't just whisper about what Steve did behind closed doors, he put it on record, in print, with his name attached to it. And Steve still somehow walked away with his reputation intact. That right there tells you everything you need to know about how power operates in Hollywood.
Steve Harvey be the headliner of the Kings of Comedy. They used to let Steve Harvey was the headliner because at the time he was having the most, he was the most famous.
Right.
But he was bombing too many nights coming behind DL, Sid, and Bernie. They had to make him the host. But Steve Harvey found a way, even though he wasn't talented.
Back in 2003, Bernie Mac sat down with GQ magazine and said it plainly. Steve Harvey was jealous of him and actively worked to take roles that were supposed to be his, including a spot in Ocean's 11. That's not a rumor. That's not a leak from an anonymous source. That's Bernie Mac on the record, naming the situation directly. And according to that same GQ piece, someone operating out of Steve's camp actually picked up the phone and called director Steven Soderbergh to push Steve into that role instead of Bernie. Think about what that means. Somebody in Steve's circle made a deliberate move to cut Bernie out of a major Hollywood film. That's not competition. That's sabotage with a strategy behind it. When GQ asked Bernie how he processed finding that out, he didn't explode. He didn't threaten anybody. He said the Hollywood game is a cold game. And then he said something that revealed exactly who he was as a man. Bernie refused to go low. He said he wasn't going to sling mud, wasn't going to get revenge, wasn't going to let the ugliness of that industry turn him into something he wasn't. He said Steve and anybody else could say whatever they wanted, that nobody had control over him, that he had the control. That's a man who understood his own power even when the machine was moving against him. But Bernie wasn't done. He went after Steve's ego too, and he did it with surgical precision. He told GQ to go back and watch the Kings of Comedy footage. Said that whenever Steve introduced his co-headliner Cedric the Entertainer, he made it about himself. Bernie saw the pattern, he clocked the ego years before the public did, and when asked if it made him angry, he said Steve wasn't even good enough to make him upset.
Show me how you made it with no talent. Find a talentless comedian who made it. Steve Harvey kissed. That's how he got it. Everybody thinks Steve Harvey some stand-up ass man. No, motherfucker, he kissed the old girl who owned TV One. He used to kiss her.
That line alone should have ended the conversation. What happened after all of that is just as telling as the betrayal itself. Bernie stepped back from Hollywood. He said there wasn't anything out there for him anymore. He redirected everything toward his wife and his daughter and said the best of his life was right there at home. Whether that was genuine peace or quiet resignation from a man who got tired of fighting a rigged system, only Bernie knew. But the fact that a talent of his magnitude pulled back from the industry after going public about being undermined, that's not a coincidence. Then Steve got asked about Bernie's GQ comments, and he did what people in his position always do. He denied it and flipped it. In a 2010 interview with Ed Gordon, just 2 years after Bernie died, Steve sat there and said he was upset at Bernie for making those statements, called what was in GQ vicious, and painted himself as the victim of a smear. He tried to make it sound like the magazine twisted Bernie's words and manufactured drama that didn't exist. But here's what Steve conveniently left out. GQ quoted Bernie directly. Bernie reviewed that interview. Bernie signed off on it. You don't put words in a subject's mouth in a major publication and just walk away clean. What Steve was doing in that 2010 interview was gaslighting, rewriting history in real time, and counting on the public to forget what Bernie actually said in his own voice. And people who were inside that world didn't forget. Corey Holcomb, who used to open for Bernie, came out recently and said what a lot of people in comedy already knew, that Steve Harvey never deserved the headliner position he held over Bernie or Cedric, and that the spot he got came from working relationships with producers rather than raw talent. That's someone from inside the culture saying out loud what the industry spent years trying to bury. Then you bring Samuel L. Jackson into this picture, and the story gets even more complex. Samuel was tight with Bernie, tight enough that he stood up and spoke at Bernie's funeral. And according to people close to Samuel, he had a very specific theory about what happened behind the scenes, that Marjorie Harvey was the real architect of Steve's ambitions, and that she was the one in his ear convincing him he deserved that Ocean's 11 role more than Bernie Mac did. Marjorie, not Steve, was allegedly the driving force behind that power grab. But here's where it gets layered. Sources close to Samuel suggest he actually tried to pull Steve aside and warn him about Marjorie. And why would Samuel feel qualified to have that conversation? Because Samuel L. Jackson has been married to LaTanya Richardson Jackson for decades. They met as young people in Atlanta in the late 60s, early 70s, long before any Hollywood door had ever opened for him, long before the fame, long before anyone knew his name. Samuel always said that's the foundation of why his marriage held. His wife didn't choose him because of what he became. She chose him when he was nothing, and he never forgot that. Bernie Mac operated by that same code. Bernie married Rhonda Gore in 1977, his high school sweetheart. He was grinding on the stand-up circuit for years before the Kings of Comedy documentary changed the game for him, before the Bernie Mac show made him a legend. Rhonda was there through all of it, the broke years, the small rooms, the nights when nobody believed the dream was going to pay off, and Bernie never turned his back on her. They stayed married for 31 years, all the way until August 2008 when Bernie left this earth. Steve Harvey did the exact opposite. The moment the clout started building, Steve walked away from his marriage and moved toward Marjorie, and the timeline here matters.
The first word I ever said to her was, I don't know who you are, but I'm gonna marry you one day.
Steve claims he first laid eyes on Marjorie back in 1990 at a comedy club, and allegedly told her on the spot that she was going to be his wife one day. Now here is where this story shifts from messy to calculated, because think about what Marjorie actually did. She turned Steve down when he had nothing. She wasn't riding for him when he was sleeping in his car between gigs. She wasn't in his corner when the lights were off and the bookings were dry. She waited. She watched. And the moment she could see the trajectory bending toward success, she made her move. That is not a love story. That is a strategy session. And the timing lines up too perfectly to ignore. By the time Marjorie decided to reconnect with Steve, she had already married her second husband, Darnell Woods. But then Darnell caught a case and got locked up. Steve, meanwhile, was now a television presence, no longer grinding at small comedy clubs, but actually building something real in the industry. And right on cue, Marjorie found her way back into his orbit. You want to call that coincidence? Go ahead. But the culture sees patterns, and this pattern has a name. There was just one problem standing between Marjorie and Steve Harvey's future: his second wife, Mary Shackelford.
Think about how quickly he moved forward from me to Marjorie. That was disturbing.
Mary was there during the come-up. She helped him build. She stood next to him when the industry hadn't fully embraced him yet. They even shared a son together, Winton. But none of that mattered once Marjorie re-entered the picture. Steve dropped Mary, moved Marjorie in, married her in 2007, and adopted her 3 children, Morgan, Jason, and Laurie. Like the previous chapter of his life never existed. Mary later said publicly that the speed at which Steve erased her was disturbing. Not painful, disturbing. That word choice tells you everything about what she witnessed from the inside. And it did not stop at the marriage. According to Mary, Steve took Winton from her, used his money, his celebrity, and his access to the legal system to win custody, and then, allegedly, turned that boy against his own mother.
I just don't see how Marjorie, in particular, can call herself a mother to her own children and deliberately try to sabotage my relationship with my son. I don't really get that, because personally, even if it was a vengeance vendetta thing.
That is not a divorce. That is a demolition. And Mary pointed the finger directly at Marjorie as the architect behind it. The one pulling the strings. The one who convinced Steve to cut Mary off completely, isolate Winton, and burn the whole bridge down so nothing from his past life could reach him anymore. Now stack that next to what happened with Bernie Mac. Because right around the same window, the same period Steve was dismantling his life with Mary and rebuilding it around Marjorie, his friendship with Bernie Mac collapsed. One of the most important relationships in his professional life just disintegrated. And insiders have said that was not organic, that there were forces pushing Steve in that direction, that Marjorie's fingerprints are on that fracture too. And this is exactly where Katt Williams enters the conversation with something that recontextualizes all of it.
Never seen them have anything that I ever wanted. If you sign up for their program, you get a light-skinned, weird-faced wife that never do an interview.
Oh, man, come on.
Listen, in 20 years, won't do an interview. Nobody's ever talked to her, and that she's never been interviewed anywhere.
You remember what Katt said on Club Shay Shay? He laid out this idea that black comedians trying to ascend to a certain level in Hollywood are funneled into what he called a program. And part of that program, part of the package deal, involves a light-skinned, particular-looking wife who functions less like a partner and more like a handler. Katt specifically pointed at Steve, pointed at the pattern of how he left his previous life behind the moment Marjorie arrived, and called out the audacity of Steve now presenting Marjorie as the woman who believed in him from the beginning, when the historical record says she only showed up once the checks started clearing. Now let's be clear about one thing. Steve Harvey is not a passive victim in any of this. He made choices. He left Mary, he walked away from Bernie, he signed off on every decision that burned those relationships to the ground. Marjorie did not hold a gun to his head. But the question Katt Williams put into the atmosphere, and that this entire story keeps circling back to, is whether the program is real, whether the pattern is intentional, and whether the woman next to Steve Harvey is a wife or an assignment. That question does not have an easy answer. But the fact that it keeps coming up across multiple people and multiple situations means it demands one. If you're tired of the watered-down takes and want the real story behind what's happening in the culture, stick with BarzBuzz. We don't do PR, we don't do spin. Just the truth the industry doesn't want trending. Subscribe and make sure you're notified. The next one drops sooner than you think.